think despite the fact that we know the term, there's still a lot of stigma around mental health.
Absolutely.
And feeling like it's somehow a weakness, or that there's something fundamentally wrong if you have to say, I'm having this pain. But we wouldn't say that. If your leg hurt, you wouldn't say, oh, no, I'm just going to continue to walk through it. You're going to injure yourself more.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Bettering Badgers, presented by UNCUT Madison. I am Dana Rettke, and today we are with Dr. Joy Ippolito, who is the Social Impact Investment Director for American Family Insurance. So hi, Joy.
Hi, Dana.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got here, a little bit of what your role is here at AmFam, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So I've been with AmFam almost 3 years now, and prior to this work, I was actually invested a lot in the mental health field. I was a trained licensed social worker, as well as working in a lot of different community systems. So everything from juvenile justice to children and teen mental health, and really focused on helping families, making sure that we could help support all of the needs that they have.
That's amazing. That's so fantastic. What does a typical day in the life look like for you in your role?
Yeah, it's interesting. So at the Institute, which is where I work, we focus on investing in startups. And we have a mission at the Institute to help close equity gaps in the US. And so the area that I oversee, we've deemed healthy youth development. And what that means is that we invest in startup companies, can work with kids as young as birth, or still in the womb, up to young adulthood, so through the college years. And the focus on that is really to say, if we can help prevent or we can intervene early, I think we can get everyone on, the right track. We know that everyone doesn't start off at the same, access to things in life. And so the goal of the startups that we look for are really trying to help close some of those equity gaps. Maybe it's access to mental health, maybe it's access to the right types of tools so that you can be ready for school. So we have many different focus areas, but really a passion of mine has always been mental and behavioral health.
So something that has recently been in the news was the Olympics. Super exciting time. I know that it was really exciting for me to watch. And a hot topic from those games was Simone Biles, obviously. She withdrew from the games for the betterment of her own mental health. And obviously there's a lot of criticism from the media, and she obviously had a strong support system around her, like you were just saying. What is your take on that?
Yeah. One of the things I always say is that, we can't be good for others unless we're feeling good for ourselves. And I'm not going to speculate what may have been going on in her head, but obviously, from what has come out even in the news, there was a disconnect between how her physical body was feeling and whatever she was thinking in her mind. It could have been just that, simple disconnect. I know she said she couldn't, find herself in air, but it sounded like there were also some personal things happening in her life. And I think it takes a great deal of strength to step back and be able to reflect on that, to understand that, hey, there is this disconnect between my, all the amazing physical feats that I can do and how my brain, how my mind, how my heart is feeling right now. And I think that that's a really key, important distinction that, coaches, clearly she had a coaching team that was willing to support that understood if she came forward, not just with her own self-reflections, but that she voiced that to someone, that they said, yep, we understand, and stepping away from that. And I imagine that had to have been incredibly hard decision.
Absolutely.
But I think there's such amazing strength. I know that she received some criticism, but again, to go out there, and if something had happened to her physically, that would have been terrible for her Absolutely. As an individual, but that could have really also shaken the foundation of her teammates. No one would have wanted her to go out there at all costs, because at the end of the day, we all want to be around for a very long time. And so, yeah, I admire her greatly for, again, just having that mental fortitude and having the people around her to help support that decision and let her know that, yes, it's the right one.
Yeah, there had to have been a huge support system around her during that time, and just the amount of eyes that were on her in that moment was pretty insane.
Yeah.
So what are some of the projects you've worked on that have been most interesting and fulfilling for you to work on?
Yeah, when I first started this job, I was very keen on trying to find a mental health company that could help close that access gap that I mentioned. In this country, we don't have enough trained mental health professionals, whether it's a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. They go by lots of different names, but at the end of the day, they're here to make sure that, we can support the mind, just like we have lots of doctors that are here to help support the physical body. And so early days, one of our companies, it's called X2 AI, they've developed a mental health chatbot. And what's amazing about that is that it's been trained using some of the same techniques that a therapist might use. And, a lot of times with mental health, we assume that it's, that someone's life needs to change in order to feel better. And sometimes it's just about being heard. It's about feeling like there is a place and a space that is safe to disclose, I'm having this, difficult moment. I'm struggling with this very specific thing. Or maybe it's not even something specific. It could be just this generalized sense of, sadness or dread or just concern and worry. And a lot of times those things can fester if they just live within inside us and we don't kind of get them out. And so I was really pleased, with X2 because they were able to, I think, really, again, bring that to anybody. It's available 24/7. It's not like, oh, it's 2 a.m. and I don't know who to talk to. Or, maybe you've been talking to your friend and your friend's like, I'm out, with my friends. I don't want to talk about this serious topic right now. Or maybe, people are sleeping because you have a test the next day and you're like, I don't want to bother someone. And so I think that's the beauty of what they do. And interestingly, it's free. So others are paying for it, whether it's a business, whether it's a corporation that sponsors it. They've also been entering into contracts with United Way in certain states. And that's what's really cool is because folks who often need that support and that help may not know where to get it, and they may not have the funds to pay for it. And so we really want to democratize access to mental health and also be there in those crisis moments, right? We don't want anyone to ever feel like they don't have a place to reach out to. And even though it might be a computer that's actually responding, many people forget that it actually is because it responds, in such a human-like way.
Yeah, absolutely amazing work, and thank you for just making that tool accessible to everyone. Do you play much of an advocate role throughout the state of Wisconsin and beyond as well?
I do. So my previous work, I was the state's anti-human trafficking coordinator in the Department of Children and Families. And so for that, I was very focused on making sure that we have policies and programs in the state to help prevent, sex trafficking, but also to help protect some of the most vulnerable. There's a lot of, movie scenes that people think about when they think about trafficking, and it has nothing to do with that. And so I'm still very active when needed to speak about that. But more broadly, I speak about mental health as often as I can. I think despite the fact that we know the term, there's still a lot of stigma around mental health.
Absolutely.
And feeling like it's somehow a weakness, or that there's something fundamentally wrong if you have to say, I'm having this pain. But we wouldn't say that. If your leg hurt, you wouldn't say, oh, no, I'm just going to continue to walk through it. You're going to injure yourself more. For any of our athletes, if you have some kind of repetitive sports injury, you're not going to ignore it. You're going to take care of it, because not taking care of it is a detriment to you and your team's performance. And so the exact same thing is true of mental health. If we're not focusing and paying attention to those things that might be going wrong, then we're not going to be, again, that best version of ourselves and the best version to kind of bring forward, in the team. And so I talk about mental health a lot. Sometimes, I share some of my own personal journeys because I've certainly experienced trauma. And I think we just need to normalize that, in that moment, it can feel very overwhelming, but there's another side to it. I talk about it as kind of being in that dark space or that darkness and the ability to step into the light. And we need to have systems, support, friends, coaches, administrators, professors, everyone that's around an individual's life to be there as that supportive person, not to be judgmental. And ultimately too, the unfortunate thing is there are still going to be some people that are afraid of it, right? That might not want to talk about it, but just running into that one person who maybe doesn't give the response you need doesn't mean that the world is not here to help support. And so, yeah, I will speak about mental health at any point I can if it gets the message out that, it's how we take care of ourselves. It's how we make sure, again, we're that best version of ourselves every day.
Absolutely. And I think that every person in someone's life has the opportunity to be even just that little bit of support and just capitalizing on that every day, I think, is one easy way to end the stigma. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Obviously, the pressure on college student athletes is pretty high. And I think student athletes definitely put a lot of pressure on themselves, but there's also a lot of external pressure that comes with being a student athlete. How do you think that we can promote student athletes being healthy for themselves, along with coaches also promoting student athletes taking initiative and being as healthy as they can possibly be?
That's a great question. I think one of the important things to remember is that what works for one person won't work for everyone else. So I know in particularly, especially during the pandemic, lots of people have said, well, let's practice mindfulness and meditation. So for some people, that sense of sitting in silence like drives them crazy, right? Like you just—
I'm one of those.
Right? So, and that's a perfect example. Like I can certainly go into like a meditative state, but not if someone forces me at a time that I'm not feeling that. And so I think that's step one, is that acknowledge that if it works for you, it may not work for your teammate, if you're the captain, if you're a coach. Like just because what works for you personally does not mean it will work for everybody. And I cannot repeat that enough times. So then I think the second piece is like, what feels restorative? When I used to teach classes, I'd always ask students like, what is it that just makes you feel joyful and happy? And it can be something silly. Like it doesn't have to be something serious. You know, I used to tell people, I was like, I have a parrot and I would start watching SpongeBob, and like I was like definitely an adult, and people would laugh, and I was like, but that 30-minute break just brought me like stupid silly joy. You know, for some people it's like go for a walk, go for a run, but if like going for a walk or a run reminds you of like working out or being an athlete, that's probably not the thing to do. And so that's why it's so individualistic, and we have to acknowledge that. But I think too, what's helpful is to share some of those things. So, you know, if you're unfamiliar, in some improv teams, you know, each person is working towards that sense of group mind, right? Like the goal, just like you're on a team, you all need to kind of you need to anticipate where someone's going to go, make sure that you're there to kind of pick up where they leave off. And so that doesn't mean that you stop being an individual, right? Like everyone still has an individual, but you're kind of working towards that group mind. And people are bringing a different character, or they're bringing, you know, a different part of themselves to that. In some mental health circles, people will often say, you know, once a week, here's something that really helped me relax or be happy. Here's this new technique that I learned. You could do that on a weekly or a monthly basis. And again, it's just about rotating in, just like you're going to rotate different exercises, or you're going to rotate, you know, different ways of doing practice and working out. It's the same thing for your mind. You can't pick one thing and then expect that that's always going to work exactly the same, because you'll hit that plateau. And so, you know, I think crowdsourcing amongst yourselves, making sure that it's healthy things, right? Like there are things that we can turn to, certainly, that are unhealthy long-term for our bodies and our minds. And we need to make sure that we're finding that healthy balance and not turning to those things that, you know, just simply push it out of our head. Because it's not about hiding it away in your brain. It's about addressing and confronting it, which can be really scary. But there's, like I said, indirect and direct ways to do that. But yeah, it doesn't always have to be about meditation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's a lot of trial and error. That's what I found throughout my collegiate career, is finding what works best for you. And that really is awesome, because you don't take away that individual aspect of, you know, being yourself and finding what's best for you. What do you think is the best way for coaches to advocate for their student athletes to explore those options and to try to figure out what works best for them?
Yeah, you know, again, I come back to, no one can be expected to have all the answers. Even as someone who's been trained in mental health, I'm not always going to have all the answers. So the goal is not to say you have to put on the therapist hat, but it's about creating a safe space that allows that disclosure, right? If you're having a rough time in your personal life, I've had friends very close to me who, like, you know, lost a parent while they were on the basketball team, or, you know, were going through some really difficult times when they were, like, you know, on the swim team. And the ability to share that with their coach, and for their coach to say, I see you as a person, not just as this person on the team. And I think a lot of coaches obviously do that. They understand that you're important as individuals. But it's about creating that ability to come forward, not just with something related to practice, not something related to the sport, but something about you as an individual. And it's simply, you know, again, not maybe knowing where to go, but saying, hey, you know what, let's figure this out together. Let's take the time, let me call a few people, let me find out where I can refer you so that you can get the support that you need if I can't offer it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think coaches play a huge role in that, in making sure that student athletes get that extra push. Or it doesn't even have to be a coach. It can be a professor, a parent, a guardian, anyone that cares about that person and just wants them to be their best self. That's super important.
Absolutely.
Kind of wrapping up a little bit here.
Yeah.
If you have any advice for coaches, college students, anybody like that, if you have one thing that you want them to know, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a tough question. The one thing, again, I think part of it is being your most authentic, true self. And that sounds maybe like a cop-out, but I'm now in my 40s, and I feel like when I was in my late teens and 20s, people said things to me, and I was like, yeah. And there's a point at which, in this moment, it might feel like this is the most critical, crucial moment of your life. And it is, but it's one of many, right? And so part of it is understanding that how it is right now may not be how it is going to be forever. Good and bad.
Yeah.
There's times that you're like, oh, I'm past college or I'm past high school, and now what? But on the bad side of it, if you're stuck in something, just know that it's not that way forever. There is another side to it. But when you're stuck in like that muck, you're stuck in that darkness, it can feel like there's no way up or down or out. And there is. And there's a healthy way to get there. But it does take some perspective, I think, only as you've experienced maybe life, to understand that there is that other side, so hang in there. And, again, reach out to the people. Don't be afraid. I think that's the biggest thing, is that don't be afraid of reaching out and asking for support if you need it. Because, every single person has an important role to play in this world. And sometimes, right, I call them the brain gremlins, might be like, oh, what worth do you have? Everybody has worth.
Absolutely.
And so I think just keeping that clear. And, if you're a friend of someone who sees that, make sure you reach out and, provide them the support that they need to.
Absolutely. I love that. Everyone does have a place in this world. It's something I try to advocate throughout my everyday life. And staying in the present while also keeping perspective is an absolutely great way to look at it. So Dr. Joy, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the community and beyond. It's really amazing. And it's so awesome to know that there's people like you working on these issues and hopefully creating a better world. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the work you're doing just to, I think, uncover, and shed some light on this really important topic.
Thank you.
All right.
That's a wrap.